Welcome to the Trinity Podcast. Joel Milligan here with Daniel Riddick, Tommy Carr, and Daniel Warren. Thanks for watching or listening today. And gentlemen, we're going to hit on a topic that is so important and it's good for us to talk about. It is friendship. And what I would like to know, well, actually, before I jump into that question, have you guys used Chat GPT yet?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Once.
Tommy has used it once. It's, of course, an AI, artificial intelligence generator. You can ask really just any question, and it's always interesting to see the feedback you get, and it's actually pretty accurate most of the time. I was just showing it to my wife the other day, and we were just asking random questions or whatever. But I even asked it to plan my day at Disney, and it walked me through what rides to hit at what time.
Oh,
Really? Yes.
Yeah. Huh.
Pretty incredible. But before this podcast, I decided to ask it two questions about what does a toxic friendship look like, and what does a good friendship look like. And it hit me back with probably 15 things. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to read them to you guys. So I asked the Chat GPT, what's a toxic friendship? It came back with constant criticism, lack of trust, manipulation and control, selfishness, and one-sidedness. It's like, wow, okay. A good friendship, it said trust, mutual respect, communication, shared interests, and empathy and understanding. Very good. Hey, I'm sure it got it from the World Wide Web, but I thought it was very concise and meaningful. So we might get into some of that today, but what I would like to hear from you is, who was your first friend, and what brought you together as friends? Why were you friends with them? Think back, elementary school, on the playground. Who was your first friend, and why were you friends?
I think I remember, I assume I had some kind of friends before this, but about 5 or 6 years old, I met, classic neighborhood, lived down the street friend, and we hung out, never attended school together, but we were, best buddies for years and years until junior high school. And his name was William, and we cruised the neighborhood on our bicycles and just lived our best life all throughout elementary.
My next door neighbor is a year older than me, and his name was Daniel also. So he was Daniel, and I had to get the nickname, which was the affectionate nickname Booger. That was my nickname on my street.
Really?
Growing up was Booger. I probably should not have just said that out
Thank you
loud.
so much for that.
Great info.
Yeah, so there was Daniel and Booger. And we did, because we were close in age and we were the youngest kids on the block until we both had, 4 years later, he had a little sister, the same age as my little brother, but for a while we were the youngest kids. And so we were the tackling dummies in front yard football.
Oh, yes.
We played catcher when we played front yard baseball, all that stuff. So we were the kids that got picked on, but we did a lot together all the way through. Yeah. So, now he's one of the heads of the longshoremen down at the dock and does a lot with the rescue mission.
So you're still in touch with him?
Yeah.
That's cool.
He graduated from the academy here. His kids graduated.
Does he still call you Booger?
No, thankfully. That had sort of died until I just breathed life into it.
So everybody call him Booger from now on.
A
similar story. Our family moved out near the church here in about 72, so I was 5 years old. And it was really weird. Only like 5 houses. You know where I lived over in Rolling Hills. There was like 5 houses in the cove, so it's a short cove. And somehow in the Lord's providence, everybody that lived in those houses had kids my age.
Yeah.
And so there were, Mark and Doug and Robert. And so those were immediate first friends at age 5. Then came to the academy here as 4-year-old kindergarten. And so 5-year-old kindergarten, I actually went through school with a lot of those kids. And we actually graduated as seniors after having started as 5-year-old kindergarten schoolmates.
For me, it was my friend Randy that I met in elementary school, and we're still in touch today. We talk regularly, but the way we met was he was like Joe Montana, and I was like Jerry Rice out on the playground.
Yeah.
And we teamed up every recess nobody could stop
Dominated.
us. I mean,
Dominated.
if Randy was the quarterback and I was the wide receiver, we destroyed everybody. Also, he was probably 2 foot taller than me, and he was like my bodyguard. You know, if anyone had a problem with me, I would just point at Randy.
Yeah. Randy was the protector.
That is it. That is it.
Did y'all play Super Mario together?
Yes, of course we did. My shirt, if everyone can see it. 35th anniversary of Super Mario. We already made that clear. Daniel appreciated that.
Yeah, it was a great shirt.
Great shirt. So as we think of friendships that we've had over time, there's a lot of things that factor into friendships because they're very complex, and there's a lot of things that bring us together, and friendships are important. But let's talk about this phrase, relational IQ. What is relational IQ, and why is it important when it comes to making friends, building friendships, keeping friends? Relational IQ.
You know, I think if you think about relational, or I guess maybe also emotional intelligence, you know, it's interesting. It's become very, popular to study and to talk about over the last, decade or more. And some people would say there's, I guess, studies that have been done, that it may be the single, setting aside kind of the spiritual dynamics, it may be like the single most significant factor in an individual's life to determine kind of their success, that emotional intelligence will trump education, will trump, financial means and all of those things. And it's probably a conversation that we're not engaging in around friendship and relationship as much as we should. I mean, simply it's self-awareness, and it's being able, and I think it's 2 parts. It's being able to recognize my own, emotional and relational, both strengths, and probably the more difficult one is the deficiencies, where I can recognize what I want to say and then what I should say, that's emotional intelligence, and then also in the context of friendship, it's being able to look at the people around me and somebody says something, makes a comment, blows up on you. Emotional intelligence is in many ways being able to kind of parse through and go, I know that's not the real person that's talking right now. They're responding out of, again, you're not saying this out loud most of the time, but
Yeah.
you're recognizing who people are, how they're wired, and it allows you to be able to handle both the good and the bad, because you can see where people are coming from and where you're coming from. Yeah, so it's critical, because otherwise, if you don't have this, or if you're on the low side of emotional or relational intelligence, you're going to have a short list of friends of people who are just like you probably, and you're probably going to have a long list of friends or relationships that you started that ended quickly because they said something you didn't like, you said something they didn't like, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. I think it's really good. I think you talk about awareness. I think that's really the key word there. There's an awareness and a depth. It's just like you can know when to say something, when not to say something. And then not only will you have a short list of friends, if you don't have really good relational IQ, you probably have a rotating list of friends. They just keep coming in and out of life. And you're like, well, man, people are so fickle. And you find out you're the common denominator because you have a relational deficiency.
Yeah.
And I think there's some people, and we maybe people, you're like, how did they get this far in their career? Because there's not competency sometimes, or as much they got promoted above their ability. It's usually because of high relational IQ. They know how to work with people.
Right.
And there comes a point where, can I get things done? I don't have to do it all. Can I lead people? That becomes a ceiling. But then sometimes it can be manipulative if it's not backed by character. But when you see somebody who's like, man, how did they get that job? Because I don't think they're quite smart enough to get that job. It's usually because their ability to work with people. Yeah, right. And then when you can put competency and that together, high IQ and high relational IQ, then that's where your titans and your big leaders come from.
And that's actually, and I know this is not the point of our conversation, but it is a really key point, friendships and relationships. Now every now and then there's an exception to this, but I mean, in leadership especially, the ceiling will be the number of people you're able to kind of navigate and manage. And, and if it's like, hey, I really can't work with anybody except for him, it's just an indicator that, not that the whole world's messed up, but that you just have a really kind of low relational or emotional kind of IQ. The higher you get up in leadership, the more the reality is you're going to be having to manage and lead, multiple or dozens or hundreds or thousands of people. And there's no way to do that in a healthy way unless you really develop in this area. And that's true at a professional level.
Right.
And then it's certainly true at an individual and a relational level.
It's my ability to know what my wife or my kid or my friend or the people that I'm leading, what are they trying to say, see through what they're saying, how they're saying it, to that emotion, reading through that. And then also, what do they need from me? And so that's where it practically begins to play out.
Can I throw out a question? I'm not trying to take your job.
Listen,
Joel.
please go for it.
I just had this random. I had this random thought. What is the difference between? I think this would be interesting to hear. What is the difference between a deficiency? I got an area I can grow in, which we all do. But here's a problem versus a personality that's wired differently around relationships. One of those is natural. It's the way we're, and even at this table, we've got all kinds of relational personalities. The other one is a problem that needs to be grown, corrected, or it's an area of growth. What are the distinctions between the two?
Between deficiency?
Between deficiency and personality. One is I've got a relational problem in my life. The other one is I'm wired differently than you are. One of those is negative. One of those is natural. How do you kind of parse out, do I have a problem in my life?
Yes,
or is this just, yeah. But how do that's the question I'm trying to ask. How do I know if I've got a relational problem or if I'm just an introvert and that's the way God made me?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because I like the temperament studies. That's just always something I've been interested in. I know in modern days it's the Enneagrams, right?
Yeah.
And so there are ways that you're stamped, I think, when you're born, just with saying when you're an extroverted temperament, you're an introverted. There's two that are extroverted. There's two that are introverted. You always say he's a natural born leader. Okay, what does that mean? He's a natural born salesperson. He's a natural born. And so there's just things that we have a proclivity to. Like it's always been easy for me to get along with people. I just don't have an issue getting along with people. Introverted people, sometimes they're like, I'm happy, but they don't look happy. And I'm engaged and they say 3 words. So I do think a deficiency is, hey, I'm operating with a blind spot that I'm unwilling to address.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
And so if there's a blind spot in my life, so let's just say, and this is not true, but let's say that Daniel's unusually coarse with people. All right. A blind spot with him to go, hey, this is the way I am. Well, in the context of his life, that's going to be a deficiency that will hold him back. And I was listening to what you said, depending on what profession he chooses. So George Patton had a very low relational IQ.
Right.
He was task driven.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that inspire love and hate at the same times. But they're inspired. So Daniel, if he has a deficiency, I can go to him and say, hey man, you're just unusually coarse with people. And if he goes, that's something I need to change in my life, he has a high relational IQ. He's not really operating from a
blind spot.
Right. Yeah. A blind spot in his life.
Yeah. And I think it's also, if this is true about every relationship, that's probably a sign of deficiency, because sometimes it may be like puzzle pieces. If I'm this way and it rubs you the wrong way because our temperaments clash, but me and you, it's not, well, then it's probably temperamental.
Yeah, temperamental.
Whereas it doesn't matter who I'm around. Everybody gets... It has issue with this in my life. That's a signal.
It's problematic if we go, everybody thinks I'm a jerk, and that's just the way God made me.
Yes.
Right. There's a deficiency.
Right.
Well, can I answer?
Yeah, Joel,
question?
go ahead. Yeah, please. Absolutely. Joel, what do you think about that?
So the way I would see it is, and I'll just relate this to me because that makes it easy, between personality and deficiency. My personality is that if I walk into a room, just the way God created me, I'm able to feel what everyone's feeling in the room. Like I can just look around the room and I instantly kind of pick up if this person might be upset, or this person may feel like no one's talking to them, or this person, that's just a personality thing. That's just how God made me. A deficiency would be if I don't know if anyone likes confrontation, but I really don't like it. I hate confrontation. And I've had to grow in that. A deficiency would be, I need to resolve conflict. And sometimes it is being willing to confront people, even though I don't like it. So I can grow in that. But the fact that I feel everyone in the room, that's just the way that God's created me to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be overwhelming, but God's made me that way, and I just got to use it for His purpose.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the way that I would explain that.
And I think it's really
If that
good.
makes sense.
No, it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And I think if you look who Jesus picked out as the disciples, you find a whole lot of deficiencies. You find
Yeah.
a whole lot of temperaments. You
Yeah,
find,
yeah.
Peter over there, just every time he's talking first, he had
Right.
some mouth problems. And so, you would see Jesus the way he dealt with him, and he would deal with him in that deficiency. You would see John, who could be somebody really given to anger early, but by the time he gets to writing New Testament, there's a different John. So he's corrected the deficiency, the blind spot has been addressed, and the Holy Spirit has the ability to change deficiencies
Yeah,
in every person's life.
it's good. Great question. So what does it look like when it comes to maybe your own friendships or friendships you've experienced? This past week we talked about Jonathan and David, and we were looking at their friendship. But there's two types of friendships that are on different opposite ends of the spectrum. I want to define those and share the pros and cons of those. What's the difference between a consumer relationship when it comes to your friendships, and then more of like a covenant relationship? What are those, and then what's the pros and cons of those? A covenant relationship and a consumer relationship.
I think in its simplest form in our teaching, we were talking about the idea that a consumer is very much conditional and about what I get out of the relationship, whereas covenant is really sacrificial and what can I give. And there's the benefit on the consumer, there's the obligation, responsibility on the covenant. And and in our culture, we tend to be, all our relationships are so consumer based. What have you done for me lately? Yeah. Whereas you watch, like there's a movie called, I think it's called The Covenant, that's out right now about the obligation some special forces soldiers felt toward the interpreter that had saved their
I've seen
life.
that.
It's called The Covenant because they were in Eastern culture, that you see that like in some of those current event with our forces over there. And then traditionally, if you're a guest in my home, I have a covenant responsibility to protect you and to meet your need and to take care of you because you're a guest in my home. That's a ancient East tradition that's not really part of our culture. And there, even if it costs me everything, I'm going to take care of you. That is a covenantal responsibility and relationship that it's not about a give and take, and it's not win-win. It would be I'll lose so you can win aspect of that. So at its core in a relationship, that may be some examples.
I could tell a story, and I'm not going to use like anybody's name, but and I've actually could share the story multiple times where I've sat down with someone who we would call each other friends in an authentic way, but I could tell they needed to tell me something. They perceived I wasn't going to enjoy hearing, or they were going to do something that they didn't think I was going to like, or they wanted to give feedback that they thought was going to be hard for me to hear, and I could sense the resistance of them. Like they want, it's clear, like you just said, when somebody, you can feel they need to say something, and it's going to be a hard conversation, but they're hesitant to say it, and their hesitancy is because they are unsure if this relationship is a consumer or a covenant relationship. And if it's a consumer relationship, the calculation they're making in their mind is, well, if I say what I'm about to say, it could end the friendship.
Yeah.
And I have on a number of occasions, I'm not saying this to make myself look good, I'm just saying in the context of the dynamic, I could tell the struggle they're going through in their mind, and I finally just stopped them and I said, hey, listen, we're friends.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you need to say to me, and when you're done talking, we're still going to be friends, whatever you say. And all I'm trying to do is let them know that the relationship that we have is not built exclusively on you making me feel good and me making you feel good. It's built on something deeper than that. I think in a practical way, that is an example between a consumer or a covenant, relationship.
One of the most hurtful things in life is to when you think you're in a covenant friendship. Yeah. And you only discover when pressure is placed upon the friendship, right, that you've all the time been in a consumer friendship.
Yeah.
And that is it's a personal affront. It makes you question yourself. It's something you carry with you daily. That, man, I thought we were in this covenant. So covenants have three aspects in the Old Testament: sign, sacrifice, and solemn words. So there's a sign of that friendship. There's these solemn words that you exchange as friends, which Daniel just did. He stopped and he said, let me give you some solemn words. No matter what you say, we're still going to be friends. The truth is, this sign of that friendship is, regardless of how painful it is, and you could have used my name. I wouldn't have mind using my name. But no matter how difficult.
Tommy comes in and says a lot of things that can ruin friendships at a lot of times. Like, we've all had that experience.
Right. And so, but here's the truth is, but you do that with this love of covenantal friendship, which I think, when I was young, I heard a preacher say, if you end your life with 5 friends, true friends in your life, that you've really lived a great life. And I used to go, no, I've got hundreds of friends. In fact, look at my Facebook account. I've got thousands of friends. Yeah. And it's a hurtful day when you figure out that some of those that you thought were covenantal friendships are actually consumer friendships.
And by the way, what Tommy is saying, there's an application there. If we know how painful that revelation would be, it should cause us to be serious about pursuing covenantal, not consumer relationships, or we're just as likely to do it to someone else. You know, if that's the dynamic, we know it hurts us. Yeah, we can fall into the same trap with others if we're not careful.
And the thing about that is, with friendships, we have to admit, it's like, I'm even thinking of some of the people that, man, I thought, you're in covenantal, but you ended up being in a consumer friendship. You have to allow for mistakes inside of a covenant friendship.
Right. Yeah. I know I've heard the illustration at marriage conferences that idea. You make deposits into the relational bank, and then sometimes you have to make withdrawals. Yeah. In a consumer relationship, if you go into deficit spending, which I don't know about you guys, but often in relationships that happens, especially the closer the relationship, there comes times where you're like, ugh, I've been in deficit spending for a while, and we know we need to, but in a consumer, I mean, when that account hits zero, if it goes in the red, then it's done. They're going to walk. But in a covenant, you have the responsibility. Hey, this is you have a big debt. You've really gone deep into the red, but I'm still here for you. Yeah. And I think that the consumer is about the balance. Is there more in the bank than's being taken out of it? Well, then you're doing more for me than you're hurting me.
Yes.
Covenant says no matter what, it
doesn't matter. Yeah.
And what you just said, Daniel, the pain that you feel, the more, look, if you got a very casual relationship, and it could be a covenant or a consumer relationship, the truth is, if you find out a very distant relationship was built on what they were getting from you or you're getting from them, and it's ending, I mean, I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying you can move on with your life. The pain quotient goes up so much when as you get closer, the relationship, and then you discover the ones that were close to you were consumer relationships.
Yes.
It gets incredibly, painful. And again, it should really cause us to look at those who are in our tighter circle, those 5 people, and go, well, how am I treating those relationships? Because those have the potential to be really fruitful, and they have the potential to be devastatingly painful if they break down.
Let me give you an example, and I don't mean this, won't get into details, doesn't matter. Daniel navigated this as well as you can navigate it yesterday with me in just a thing we were talking about. And what he said actually stuck out to me even last night. I was kind of thinking through life, and he goes, I can trust you. I'm going to trust you with this information. And really what he said, I'm about to tell you something that could hurt you, but I'm going to trust you because we trust each other. Yep. And I thought about that even laying down. I'm like, man, well, that's a sign of a covenantal friendship. I didn't even know we were going to talk about this today. But that means, hey, I can make a mistake and you have forgiveness. I can even do something that wounds you, but you will forgive me. I can make even a critical error and we're still going to be friends, and I can trust you with this information. That's a sign of a covenantal friendship.
Yeah. So on the opposite side of that, maybe we can get super practical in a way. How can I identify if I'm in a consumer friendship? What are some red flags that should help me go, oh, wait, this is built on conditions. This is a consumer friendship that I am in. What are maybe some key things being like, hey, if this is happening, you're in a consumer friendship and you need to evaluate that friendship?
I think the big thing is, what would it take for you to walk away from that friendship? Yeah. And if you walked away, would it be because they hurt you? Sometimes you have to walk away because it's what's best for them. It's I got to stop enabling, and they built this bad codependency. That's different, but I'm done. There's a great book. I read it in my early 30s, and it really impacted me. It's the weirdest title: 9 Things You Simply Must Do to Succeed at Life, Love, and Relationships. I think it's this, but by Henry Cloud. Were you in the group that read that? Yeah, I think you just come on staff. We read that together. Henry Cloud talks about going into business partnership with a guy, and the guy said, "Now listen, we're going to have a great partnership. I want to let you know, if you cross me, you don't want to do that, because whatever you give, I'll give double." And he says, "You know what? I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm not going to enter into a covenant relationship, literally a business partnership with somebody who isn't willing to give grace when I need it." And so I think you have to, what does it look like when you get hurt? And if somebody hurts you, do you absorb that, or do you hurt back? Or are you going to walk if it gets too bad? That's a question, because I think Jesus is the ultimate in that covenant relationship. And he bore he bore our stripes. He bore our wounds. The chastisement of our sins was upon him. That's what covenant does. It doesn't demand you pay back. It bears the pain. And there's things, when somebody sins against us, they can't fix it. It's a sin against. I either have to demand penance till I'm satisfied, or I absorb it, or I walk away. And so God did not demand that we do penance for our sins. Jesus bore the stripes, and by his stripes we're healed. The chastisement of our sins are upon him. And I think that's a question. How do you handle those conflicts? Do you hold it over them forever? Well, then that's really more consumer. Do you walk away when you get hurt? Go and get stuff? Do you bail? I think that's things you need to ask.
That's a really good point, Daniel. That how long do you hold it? There's almost like a penance. There's like, you have to pay a price until I'll allow you back into my friendship. That is a sure sign of consumer friendship.
The challenge is, on, like, to your question, how can we determine, or what should we be looking for? The challenge is, nearly all kinds of relationships, and healthy relationships too, we are receiving something from. It's like, that is the mark. In covenant, you still are giving and receiving, and so there's nothing necessarily unhealthy about the fact that I'm friends with Tommy, and in our friendship, I get this value from our friendship. That's not a bad thing. Or unhealthy. The difference is that a consumer relationship places what I'm receiving from the relationship at the highest level of priority. Whereas covenant, I may be receiving all kinds of things. It just doesn't sit at the center. And so a good way to kind of do a quick inventory of my friendships would be, well, hey, what if the value that I get out of this relationship wasn't the same, or what if it changed?
Right.
What if, would we still be friends? Would I still be interested in a friendship? And if the answer is, well, yeah, sure, even if we didn't see each other as much anymore, we would still be friends. That's a really healthy sign. We're in a covenant. We're bound to something else beyond what I'm receiving. We could get really kind of personal with this, and I've had to live this at times, where it's like, I look at people, like in the context of our church, and I'm a pastor, and I go, well, and not for unhealthy or wrong reasons, but what if they decided not to attend our church anymore? Would we still be friends? And just being transparent, it's like, sometimes that circumstance plays itself out, and you actually have to go, well, wait a second, is my relationship with them going to be only about their affinity for the thing that I've kind of given my life to specifically, or was it actually built on something deeper and more significant than that? And again, that's in a ministry context. All of us probably have those dynamics that we could look at and go, is this friendship really primarily about what I'm getting from them, or are there other deeper realities? And it's not an unhealthy, and by the way, you can get into it with your spouse,
I was gonna say
your
that,
marriage, with your kids, and quickly evaluate where those relationships are primarily.
So flip the script a little bit. We're a bunch of guys at the table. I feel like this predominantly relates towards men, but could also relate towards women as well. But we'll put it in for us today. Why do most men, maybe most is not the best term there, but why do men try to fly solo in a way? They try to, I've got this, I can do this on my own. I don't need close friends. I can figure this out. Why do some men lean towards that?
I think part of that's cultural. I mean,
Yeah.
Particularly in American culture, the strong, independent, pick yourself up. I don't need anybody stereotype that was really coming out of that boomer generation and builder generation, the John Wayne type of man's man. But that doesn't work because we need people. We're built for community. But I think a lot of it's social pressure. I think a lot of it is insecurity. Yeah, my boys have heard me say friendship, the depth of my friendship, the collateral in friendship is trust. And how much do I trust you? That determines how much I let you into the parts of me that not everybody else sees. And that's a real risk because, if I trust you with something, I got to trust that you're not going to betray that trust. And then all of a sudden you could easily, you have ammunition. If it goes sideways, things about me that you could use to hurt me. And I think there's a real fear of that. So I think those are some reasons. But I've had, with my sons, we want to have that deep relationship, and we've gone to lunch and, hey, Dad, I need to tell you this. And I'm like, I don't want you to tell me that. But they want our relationship to be close, and I want to be trustworthy. And where they trust me, our relationship is able to go deeper because that's the collateral of relationship to me is trust.
This may be slightly myopic, but here's what I would say. I agree with his cultural. I think there's two words that come to mind when you say why do guys go off and they're in their lone wolf. I think there's selfishness, and I think there's self-care. I think there's selfishness. Sometimes we want to do what we want to do. We don't know nobody tell us what to do. We want to exist in our little place, and that's it. And when I'm by myself, nobody loves me like me. And there's no other dissenting voice, and I can live in that place by myself. There's selfishness. But I think there's also a healthy part to where we do need some time apart. Vance Havner said, if you don't come apart, you'll come apart. So I do think that also gives that indication that I need time by myself. I need that time where I appear to be alone. And that's part of actually my self-care. But if it gets too egregious, then it becomes selfishness, where I'm not allowing other people to be part of the journey.
I think I feel like a lot of these conversations go back to if we thought more about our formation and how we have, and Daniel just alluded to this, we don't realize how deeply we've been formed by cultural ideals or stereotypes and not biblical ideals. And so, and even masculinity is a huge part of this, so it's like if I look at Daniel and say, he's a maverick, he's a lone ranger. Well, when I say that at the table, almost all of you guys think that's good, right? That's a compliment. He's a
man's man.
It's kind of like we've embraced these ideals in our society that it's good to be a rebel. It's good to be a lone ranger. It's good to be a maverick, and I'm off and I'm out here. And then the problem is that doesn't check out in Scripture in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And yet we've kind of built our relational kind of, hey, this is what healthy manhood looks like. This is what real masculinity is. This is how real men handle their relationships. And what we realize is unintentionally, I think in most cases, we've just been formed by cultural ideals that just do not check out in Scripture. The thing that's hard about them is we've been so formed by them that we perceive that they are the right way. That ultimately that it is the ideal, and it's the thing we should be, growing towards, when actually it's the furthest description of what real healthy relationship in Christianity looks like. If you're a lone ranger relationally, if you're a maverick, if you're a rebel, you're disconnecting yourself from one of the foundational dynamics of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, which is community. Christian community. And so I think that's what it comes down to, a formation conversation. And it is good for us to rethink some of our assumptions that candidly we've grown up being taught this is, the way, and it's not.
I think it's hard because there are aspects where we're nonconformists. We're not to be conformed, but that doesn't mean we're lone wolf mavericks.
Yeah, right.
And I think, it's for Mother's Day, I read definitions that Mom have of words. Independent. That's what we want all of our children to be, as long as they do what we tell them to do.
Yeah.
We feel that tension, I think, and it's hard. But I think what you're saying is very spot on. We have to learn what would God have me do, and how do I be interdependent. I'm not independent. I'm not dependent. In Christian community, we're interdependent. We need each other. It's reciprocal relationships where we're leaning on and we're walking together. And I think that's really the call for us.
So there's a danger in friendships to get caught in what people can refer to as like an echo chamber, people that just tell you what you want to hear. But the Bible talks a lot about iron sharpening iron, and that's obviously a very, difficult task. And sometimes it's hard and it hurts. So why is it important to have people in our life that tell us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear? Why does that make for good biblical friendship?
Truth, light, that's always our friend. And I think we have to have that exposure. And if I'm unwilling to tell you a hard truth about yourself, I care more about me and how you feel about me than I care about you. Because I don't want you to be mad at me. So I will avoid telling you what I know I need to tell you. And that becomes very selfish in our parenting. We want our kids to like us so we don't have hard conversations with them. Yeah. We want our friends to like us so we don't have hard conversation. Now there's ways we need to do that. Speak the truth in love, be always with grace, seasoned with salt. But there's wisdom in how we do it. But I think we have to be willing to put that relationship in jeopardy. I remember a long time ago, a conversation I had with a friend who was in a very serious relationship that was headed toward marriage. And I just sat down with him and said, dude, this is not good.
Yeah.
And he came back, and it really hurt our friendship for a long time. He came back a couple of years later. He was married to he ended up breaking off with that. It didn't end well, and then got married. He came back and says, you spoke a hard thing, and I was mad at you for a long time. But it was truth, and I appreciate you willing to put that out there. And there's times where I probably haven't done that. I've avoided because I'm like, I don't know if I care enough about that relationship to put myself through it.
Right? I don't have the bandwidth to deal with that.
But if the people that are real close to me, I want to be able to say, hey, I need to have a hard conversation with you, and I want you to know I love you. And I need people to do that with me, to call out those blind spots, because that's why we need it. But I think when we're not willing, we really value our feelings and our safety, and it may speak to the insecurity of the relationship, and we're putting that over how much I value you. And I'll let you go through things that I could have helped you with, just so I don't get put in a bad position or a bad light.
Yeah. I think Paul said it best when he just made a simple statement. He goes, have I become your enemy because I've told you the truth? And I think he was saying, hey, listen, then I love you enough to allow you to hate me in order to impart truth unto you. And that is a real sign of covenantal relationship, that if I saw something in Daniel's life, here's what I can't. If I go to Daniel and say, listen, I'm not saying I'm right, but I may have a view that you don't, or perspective you don't. And if I say, hey, Daniel, I'm just going to make up something, Daniel, like, right, your sermons are too deep, right? I'm just
That's not.
Hey,
Yeah, just pulled one out of the air on that one.
Your sermons are too deep, and 40% of your congregation has no idea what you're talking about. And people have come to me as a friend. I'm going to come. If he goes, hey, listen, let me push back on that just a little bit, but I appreciate you telling me what that's about. I'll be looking at that, and I'm not saying I'm right. But if he gets offended, and then here's only by pride comes contention. And so I think a sign of that covenantal friendship, why we need that, is listen, they've both come to me and said it, but we talked about it yesterday, that we thought we said something from the platform, and it's like, maybe it didn't come across, and we should have that ability to sharpen each other. That idea of iron sharpening iron, that doesn't mean there's not sparks. And that doesn't mean that there's not friction and there's not heat and there's not uncomfortableness. And that is a real quality of a covenantal relationship.
There are two things that I think they are similar, but they're not the same when it comes to criticism. And there's, on one hand, there's a healthy dynamic on how we manage relationships. And I don't think we've talked about it on this podcast, but many would have heard, it's like there are groups of people in your life, and you need people. There's people that are pouring into you, and you need those. There's peer relationships which provide a lot of the friendship and the camaraderie, and you need those. There's people you're pouring into, and you need those. And then there's a group of people that they're just draining you. They're critical, they're negative, and we're kind of taught. And I think this is a good wisdom principle. Hey, to the degree that you're able to manage those are not. They're not healthy for you. And if your life is overwhelmed with critical and negative people, that can be really problematic and, can set you back. Sometimes in our thought process and our desire to kind of mitigate negative or critical people, we push back against all criticism. And critical people and criticism are similar, but they're not the same. And one of those can be, detrimental to our relational health. The other one, really, actually, the ability to receive and take criticism from in love, I think that goes without saying, is actually a sign of relational health. I think, and sometimes in our zeal to get rid of one, we throw out the baby with the bathwater, and so we just try to surround ourselves with people who are never gonna criticize us.
And I think as the friend coming to you, I have to also come in a spirit of humility and a spirit that this is my perspective looking at you, and I love you enough to present it. I'm not even saying I'm 100% right, but it's still the right thing to say to you. And that's a hard lesson to learn. Just a quick story. We used to teach a pretty large couple Sunday school class. So Rhoda and I were at the mall one day, and we saw a girl in our Sunday school class. And so we're in a department store, and she's down there. All of a sudden, this guy comes just out of the aisle, gives her a big old hug, and I'm like, that's not her husband. And it just had that moment of, well, that's just kind of awkward. So then kissed her, and I'm sitting there going, so Rhoda comes in, she goes, well, that's not her husband. I went, what do you do here? It's like, this is going to be awkward, period. I'm like, well, I'm just going to slide closer down the aisle. And I didn't know I had this tension. So I just slid down the aisle a little bit. And they looked over and smiled and just kept right on with their PDA. And it was just fun. It was just so I finally went, hey, how y'all doing? And she goes, you think I'm my sister. I went, what do you mean? She goes, we're identical twins. I had no idea she was an identical twin. And I just went, I'm sorry. She goes, no, I'm actually glad if it would have been the other, that would have been an awkward situation. So I went back over to her. I said, you judgmental person, you. But that would have been a time. So my perspective was wrong. But it's still right to be engaged in other people's life, knowing that a covenant friendship would survive that type of
handle.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
And going back to that, that's funny. That emotional IQ, the ability to decipher what they're saying from how they're saying it.
Yeah.
And even critics that they don't have, we're not in any relationship. You get email or comments, and it's like emotional IQ allows me to, right, what are they actually saying? Is that a valid criticism? Because I want to be the best I can be, and I can grow from anybody, but then sometimes it's hard to divorce the emotion from the truth.
That may be the hardest thing in the world.
That emotional IQ allows me to be able to control the emotion and get to the root. And then sometimes, or just say, I'm not even going to read anonymous mail or anonymous email, or I consider the source, and I can let it go. It allows me to be able to do that.
Daniel, to reference, you're talking to a friend about a relationship. I had to have a hard conversation years ago with a friend that was dating a girl, and I just felt like this was going the wrong way, and had to pull him aside and share how I felt. And I was, try to speak the truth in love, and he listened, but continued to date this girl. And now they've been married for 10 years and they have 3 kids and they both love Jesus. And so I was completely wrong, but I was willing to share kind of my sense of, hey, here's what I feel about this. So I totally get that.
That's funny. Yeah, there's only been 2 couples that have done premarital counseling and had the conversation. I just think this is a bad idea. One of them is a member of our church, and they bring it up all the time.
You told us not to get married.
And I always tell him, well, you surprised all of us. And she's like,
You beat the odds.
Yeah, they owed that.
So Daniel's saying, based on what I knew, I was still right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was not alone in that criticism, but he's been an incredible husband and father. So we always joke about that.
So let's jump into our kids for a second when it comes to friendships, and we'll kind of finish up the podcast here. We're doing a series called Table Talk at our church, and we're talking a lot about parenting and marriage. And so I think it's important, we all are dads. How do you help your kids see the importance of healthy friendships, covenantal friendships, like we've been talking about? And we have all different age children. How did you help them with that at a young age or at an adult age? How do you help them see the importance of healthy friendships?
Well, these guys have walked through this further than I have, but what I'm experiencing right now, I would say my desire, of course, in the moment or circumstances, to provide wisdom and help and all that. But I would say a bigger principle would just be engagement, and this is not the area to kind of roll the dice on with your kids and go, yeah, it'll probably work out. They'll probably make good friends. They'll probably be fine in all these relationships. And it doesn't mean I desire to control those dynamics. I'm going to be engaged. I want to know who the friends are. I'm going to ask questions. I want to understand what they're talking about. And most of that, 99% of it, is purely innocent and just, I kind of want to be in their world. And the more I'm able to experience that, the more I'm able to, as someone who is more mature and further down the road of life, to kind of begin to recognize if there are problems, if there are red flags. And it's not that our kids can't hide something from us, but I think if we're engaged in this area, you're going to end up kind of, you're going to kind of end up smoking out the majority of the issues probably before they arise, if we don't let this kind of just run its course and hope for the best.
I think we covered it. What would be 2 weeks ago now? I think we covered 2 weeks ago. My son, get wisdom.
Yeah.
I think you make sure that you're the primary influence in their life. You're aware of what's going on in their life, but you're equipping them on a daily basis to make good decisions when you're not there. The goal of every parent is not to govern how their kids behave. It's to teach them how to behave. And I think so at some point you could tell in the maturity levels that every one of our kids at different levels, to when you would trust them in a certain environment or trust them with a certain set of friends or to trust them to make the right decision. And I think that's, as far as friendships, like very rarely, I'm trying to think back, very rarely did I ever say, hey, that kid's a real problem. If we had concerns, what I did is I didn't control the friendship. I controlled the location. Like, hey, listen, you can be friends with them, but it's going to be here.
Yeah,
it's going to be in this environment. And there were some friends who were like, hey, listen, we know. So I'm going to be the primary influence, but I think what Solomon was saying is get wisdom. Teach them to make good decisions. I think the passage says, because there are people that they won't lay their head down at night until they can drag you into their life with them. So you equip them to make the wise decisions.
I think similar to what we taught on Mother's Day, it's model it and point them to Jesus. I mean, those are the big thing. But and like for us, being in biblical community, and that's why, I mean, the center of our relational and social life is in our church relationships. And then what we've seen with our boys is that's where the bulk of their relationships are driven from. And that doesn't mean all the kids in the youth group are good friends. We've gone through that with our boys, but because it's been central in an environment where they're being taught Scripture, and then God's doing a work, and all of a sudden, each of my boys have gone to that point where, like, I probably need to change some of my friend group. Yeah. And they've had that spiritual growth and maturity because we've had them in an environment where that's being taught. And you just finished a series, or you are in a series on friendship on Wednesday nights with the youth group. And that's been super helpful. And then with our daughter, who's 13, I just let her mama deal with that drama. I do not understand what's going on with that. I'm just like, oh, Melissa, I took care of the boys. This was on you.
One thing you said is very important, though. I think it's really, really critical. If you expect to control the environment your kids are in all the time, you're going to be sorely displeased.
Right.
Yeah.
In other words, and I've had parents come to me and say, listen, I want to put my kid in the academy, but wasn't like it was when I was there in 1970. Different kind of kids there. I'm like, okay, they're either going to experience in that environment with godly teachers who love them in the Lord, that'll respond to you and there's accountability, or it will happen one day when you're not there.
Right.
And so, man, give them the tools, allow them to experience life, find reasons not to say no, and allow them to learn the lessons of life. That's when, honestly, our kids went away and they were not perfect. When they went to UNF and then when they were there, Brody and I slept with a clear head on our pillow because they had been given the tools and the lifelong wisdom lessons to make the right decisions.
So should you ever, I think you kind of already made this point, but I know working with teenagers and kids, which I'll pause for a second and say, one of the best ways to be involved and to get to know who your kids are spending time with is to volunteer in kids ministry or student ministry.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
But legit, I have an awesome small group leader in our student ministry that leads the boys' small group for the grade that his daughter's in. And I'm like, that is genius.
Yeah, knows everything going on.
He knows everything.
That's very fun.
So
He brings a big bat every week to you. He says, hey, that says so-and-so's dad.
yeah. But that's literally, that is a good way to know what's going on in your kid's life, is to be involved like that.
And to volunteer, Jay Milligan at TBC.org.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. tvc.org/students down at the
Okay.
bottom of the page.
Okay.
But should you ever get to a point where you tell your kid, hey, this person, I don't want you hanging around them? Does it get that controlling? Are there points where you have to really say, because of this, no? Or is it, well, you can spend time with them, but they're going to come to our house?
Okay, so this is the oldest guy at the table just saying how we kind of handle that. Yes, there has to be that option on the table.
Okay.
Has to be. If not, you're leaving it up to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea is we're going to have given you lessons that I prayerfully hope you will see it by the time
You'll make it.
and then you come and you go, hey, Dad, he's just it's just not a problem. What do you think you'll do? I probably shouldn't hang around him. Hey,
Yeah.
that's your decision. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I've taught him a life lesson.
Yeah.
If he crosses over a barrier of wisdom, then I'm going to make the decision. Because at the end of the day, I'm his parent. I'm not his best buddy.
Like it.
And I'm just going to say, hey, listen, there's such a danger there that the Bible even says you avoid them. The passage we used in Proverbs said, don't look at them, walk away from them, walk past them. There are those people in life that they're such landmines for your children. You have to hold
You
the
have to
ultimate no.
protect them.
Yeah.
Love it. That's great. Well, great conversation on friendship with Daniel, Tommy, and Booger today.
Booger, you should have
Never should have done that. Just remember, Joel, annual reviews are coming up. Just remember that.
And I'm still kind of stuck on myopic. I will research that later on. I know. I'm sorry.
It's a normal word.
Is it a normal word? I don't know.
I guess
don't
not
think
for student pastors.
I've ever
It is 3 syllables.
used that word.
A syllable is groups of letters that form unique sounds.
I think I know what it means. I'll look it up.
Hi, Super Mario.
Hey, thanks for listening or watching the Trinity Podcast today. We want to help everyday people discover an extraordinary life with God. Remember, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcast. We'll catch you next time.